and welcome to Conversations with Lady Pruitte. Today, I am honored and privileged to have with me none other than Ambassador Dr. Cindy Courville. Hi, Ambassador.
Hi there. Thank you, Lady Pruitte. It's a pleasure to be with you again. I always enjoy our discussions.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Ambassador, I know you are actually retired, but for those who are unfamiliar with your profession, could you please share a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Okay, yes, it would be my pleasure. There are two types of ambassadors in the U.S. political system. There are career ambassadors and political ambassadors. I happen to be a politically appointed ambassador. You have all the same rights and privileges, but in our US system, we have a finite number of ambassadors that you allow the President of the United States to choose. And we do that for a reason, because to have some of his personal people in place who may bring different expertise to the table. But equally, if not more important, the greater majority of the ambassadors are career, and that's for continuity. So no matter which political party comes in power, there is a wealth of knowledge and experience at the fingertips of the President of the United States, and adds to our national security to preserve it. Now, that doesn't mean that presidents can't ignore or usurp, and we'll come to that later, because it isn't the first time in history with the previous administration that we've had a president to decide not to use the tools available. So I want people to know that the Trump administration is not the exception, but it's been a long time in the recent history that we have observed this take place. So what does it mean to be an ambassador? You serve at the pleasure of the president, no matter whether you're a career ambassador or a politically appointed. And I don't think most people know that. But your job is to implement policy, not to make policy. You have the full authority of the president, but you also work for the Secretary of State. So this is the agency that manages everything you do. And while being an ambassador was not on my list, there were many things on my list to do. To work at State Department, yes. And I came through it to a very circuitous route, not a direct route. Prior to my appointment, I served as the President's Special Assistant for all of Sub-Saharan Africa at the National Security Council. I was what we called a detailee. What does that mean? That means that it was a by name request because I already was a federal worker, a civil servant. I worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. My prior background is as an academic. I taught at Occidental College and Hanover College. And so that's what my background was prior to coming to that. I also was a political military analyst at DIA and also worked at OSD, the Office of the Secretary of Defense. So I've had the pleasure of a broad career in what some might say is a very short span of time. But when a door opens or a window cracks, I believe you should go through it. You know, the hesitation, of course, I'm human, is always there, but the opportunity, so the opportunity should outweigh the hesitation in my own mind. And you can be scared, but you take that literally leap of faith that someone is going to catch you, whether it's your belief in the divine entity or that there are other people who will catch you. And I believe in them all. So.
Wonderful. And actually, you were saying that you were politically appointed. So which administration did you work under?
I was under President Bush 43, George W. Bush. And it was a complete surprise to me that this appointment came about for this position as the U.S. ambassador to the African Union. As a detailee, and I say that because it's important, over 80% of the people who work at the National Security Council
Mhm.
are federal civil servants, not political appointees. And the reason that is done so that the government keeps running even when the administrations change. And so you will find in each administration, and I'm giving the Trump administration as an exception because most of the positions were not filled, unfortunately, which was a danger to our national security, not to have those positions filled and not to use the expertise of those individuals. So because I had briefed other people, they knew of me, so it was a by name request. So that's how I got to that. And in my position as special assistant, we proposed to the president, President Bush, that the US should be the first country to appoint a US ambassador to the African Union. And why is that important in 2001, 2002? Because they were transitioning from the Organization of African Unity, whose primary mission was the decolonization of the continent. Having succeeded in that, they changed to be more like the European Union, and that's what they are today. So the US was the first to, one, congratulate them. You made sure we got our president's letter out. And the United States was first to recognize. So that showed how much we value. The African Union is like the UN. 54 countries. Actually, the African countries are the largest numbers of countries at the UN and carry a very important voting on key issues. So that's how I got to that position and the difference. And when we, first of all, created the position, it was approved. And I have to say, much to my surprise, I was nominated, the president determined that I was going to be. Actually, we had, and the assistant secretary and myself had nominated a career diplomat.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so, it's fascinating, actually. And also, fascinating experience. I'm fascinated to learn more about the way you growing up. So let's talk a little bit about, what it was like growing up, and how do you think those experiences shaped or propelled you into the career field that you went into?
Oh, thank you for asking that, Lady Pruitte. I was born in Opelousas, Louisiana, in the heart of Cajun Creole Bayou country. I am the youngest of 4, and there are 3 remaining siblings today. I lost my oldest sister last November. And we grew up in a household where my parents fundamentally believed in education. They themselves had never had the opportunity to go beyond the 6th grade, but were intellectual people. My mother, very well read, a grassroots politician and organizer. So as the youngest child, but all of us, we were exposed to politics on a day-to-day basis. The other thing is my mother read the newspaper, so I read the newspaper. We watched the evening news, and Walter Cronkite in particular. So I, as a child, thought someday Walter Cronkite and I would do the news. So for the younger people in the audience, go back and Google Walter Cronkite. He had the kind of mannerism and faith and trust that many of our current journalists today do not embody. If he said it was going to happen, collectively, all of the United States believed, and the world believed it was going to be happening. And there was no need to fact check because he gave facts. You had to do the analysis. I think today, David Muir comes closest to that, and then Lester Holt for me. But that said, I was on the voter registration with my mother. She didn't drive, so I drove the car as a teenager. But we went to the NAACP meetings. My sister was the secretary. When she moved away, I became the secretary of the adult NAACP at age 15. I, in 8th grade, 7th grade, made the decision to be part of the freedom of choice. That is to say, the integration of the schools before mandatory desegregation. So I and a handful of young Black boys and girls decided to go to the junior high. That it was one of the most challenging years of my life in that, excuse me, a little bit of allergy here. The students, it was like being a political prisoner, not the physical torture. Well, there was that too, because we got gum put in our hair and spat on, but we also were isolated in terms of who spoke to you. And those white students who chose to befriend you could find themselves targets as well. So I think that, to me, the foundation for politics was there. And then went to undergraduate school at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, where I studied political science. I got my undergraduate, went to law school for a year, decided that wasn't the road. So it's okay to change your mind. You should not stay, you should try it, but you should not stay if that's not what you feel is your professional calling. In that case, went back to get a master's degree and did my master's thesis on the politics of desegregation. So state and local government. Made the leap to the University of Denver, where I received my PhD and another master's degree in international studies, focusing on in this case, the liberation struggle in Zimbabwe, which was then Rhodesia. I'm saying all of that. At home, it was foundational to give back, that you were responsible. You just don't consume. You have to be a party to. So that was ingrained with me by my parents, by the extended family, by the neighbors, because I rode the bus to go to my undergraduate school in Lafayette, which was 50 miles round trip, 5 days a week. My brother went to Southern University, rode the bus 100 miles because it was 50 miles each way. So education mattered. It sounds very old school now. And so when I hear Dr. Joe Biden talking about wanting to promote education at the community college level for free, it is important. It is important. College is important, but there are other skills equally. Everyone doesn't want to go to college, but you should be able to analyze. You should be able to read and write and comprehend. And that, I will say, those 7 years in that Black school gave me an incredible foundation to make the leap into a whole new universe. So I stand on the shoulders of many men and women, Black and white and all races.
That is awesome. And education, that's actually, I love education. I stress education. We stressed it with our children because as a matter of fact, when I worked at an elementary school, I remember one of the things we used to always tell the children is, education is the key out of poverty. And it really is. It opens so many doors for you. And especially in a day and time like today, where now they do stress more education than there was a time where experience seemed to be, as long as you had experience, you were good. But now they're really, really stressing education, and they've even been sending people who have all their lives, just been doing the same work just because they know how to do it, but they sent them back to school so that they can get an education or a degree in the field that they're actually working in. So education is definitely tantamount. I stressed it with my daughters, all of them, 3 of them through college, one's in college currently. So yes, I'm definitely, and even I myself, I started college, back when I was 18, whatever, and I got married when I was like second year in. And then I've been always wanting to go back until one day I actually took the opportunity when I was taking my daughter to register for school. I actually went back to finish and I got my degree finally.
Bravo.
In 2010, I did. And it was so funny because my daughters, all 3 of us were at the same school at the same time. We went to George Mason. And there were 3 of us there. So yes, they would come into my classroom and say, "Hi, mommy." And of course, then the students start looking at me like, "Wait a minute, we thought you were one of us." No, I'm an old lady in school.
No, you never stop learning. I am constantly reading, retooling. I think you and I have had this conversation about technology. I'm a techie at heart. So I always want to know why it does what it does, and trying to get a grip on it, playing with it. So what if you mess up? You're just playing, you're learning. So one of the things during the pandemic was to use the library online and the audiobooks. Reading is so critical. You should never stop reading, whether you're actually reading it yourself or the audiobooks. This will open all kinds of doors.
Wonderful. So it was wonderful to hear how you grew up. And I see now that your parents and your foundation really led you to where you are today. And it's so funny because you don't see in many households where they're actually stressing politics or anything like that. And I am dating myself. I do remember Walter Cronkite. Yes. Loved him.
Yeah.
But yes, and actually it's funny because I think back to the news then and the news now, and I see a huge difference in the news now. Very partisan. All right, so our nation has seen has had a lot of conversation over the recent years about racial and social justice. As a Black woman, how have you navigated the many unique challenges and obstacles that I know you faced as you achieved such a high-ranking position?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I navigated because I was never alone. And I say that even in the positions I were in, people from all sides, you find allies. Sometimes allies, there's a difference between an ally and a friend. And sometimes if you're fortunate, they're both. But people who do the right thing and see the injustices and raise their voices. I also had mentors, but equally, if not more important, I had patrons. And patrons are those people who have the power to change and make the decision to change things and step in. My education more certainly was critical in helping me to navigate and do well in the job, because at the end of the day, you have to do the job. And it's 2021 and you still have to be 10 times better. And that's a reality. It is not fair, but your voice and standing up in the room, but having that patron who said, that's the right person for the position. Even when others didn't want you. I had my share of cases in the Department of Defense for discrimination that I had to file. And of course, you pay a price for doing that too. But you're hoping that you're opening and widening the door opening for those who are coming after you. But they have to come with the tools to stay in the room and the confidence and the belief. So I spent longer hours at work, not always paid for it, but making sure for my own self-investment that I knew what I was talking about. How you present the information is critical. And even though for some of the younger people, this is going to be hard to hear, you have to make other people comfortable. They may not make you comfortable. And I'm not just talking about people who are of the European background or other backgrounds. You will do it even in an all African American or Black background as well. You have to go in the room knowing your information, how to present it. What we call reading the room, analyzing who is in the room, what their issues are, and how you balance that. That's a lot of work, but I actually enjoyed that. To me, even from a child, was the game I played, because as the youngest child and usually the only child in the room, I was listening and being a good listener. There's a difference between hearing something and listening. You can hear a lot of stuff go right by you, but when you listen and analyze, and that's the difference too with reading. You can read, or as in the generations before us, the teacher would say you were calling words. And that meant you didn't comprehend what was being said. So as a child, I sat quietly and listened and was analyzing everything in the room. And so that skill has served me well today. It doesn't mean that I didn't make mistakes. Of course you do. Learn from them. Who you ally with, you pay a price. And you can't do it alone. I had people in the building, out of the building. I had people lifting when I wasn't even in the room. And I also lifted for other people when they weren't in the room. And that's a responsibility. Now, if you're just African American, I'm not going to lift you just on that. You have to come with the skills. You have to want to know what to do and to learn. And we are capable of so much. So what hurts me the most right now is to watch so many young African American women, girls, men, and boys throw it all away. Not use what so many people have fought for. I think about great-great-grandmothers whose names one of them whose name I only recently learned through Ancestry.com and having my brother do the DNA. What they endured and went through, we stand on those shoulders. We stand on the shoulders of the abolitionists. We stand on the shoulders of those in Africa who fought not to come, but we also have to say those kings and queens who sold us and profited. It is not black and white. It was people benefiting from commerce. But to lose what we have today because we're not willing to invest in ourselves. Economically, I was so happy, Lady Pruitte, to hear you talk about the economic components, that we have the capability and capacity. You don't wait for someone to give it to you, no matter which ethnic group you are in. And never forget those things, but don't dwell in it and let it take you down.
And that's very true. And Dr. Courville, I think about, it hurts me also when I see some of the people in our generation, and especially, people of color who don't take the opportunity that's given them when it comes to education, when I hear somebody say, oh, I don't vote. And I'm like, what? Like, your ancestors, they were beat and they were, all these things. They went through so much so that you can have this right, and to just kind of nonchalantly throw it away or toss it off. I have a difficulty with that. That gets under my skin when I hear that, or when they say, or they have the opportunity to get their education and, they're slugging off in school, they're not paying attention, they're not, applying themselves, because it's such an important skill, and, that a lot of them don't realize until much later. And it's hard to go back because it's difficult. I know, even as I said, I went back to school. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because I felt like it made me think like, wow, if I'd have finished when I was younger with the young mind, it may have been a little bit easier. But I had to work very, very hard. And, and then also I'm very driven. So I didn't, C's were not even optional for me, things like that. I'm like, no, A's, mostly A's. I want all A's. I'm always pushing myself because I understand.
Now you're more driven than me. Maybe it's by the time my parents got to me, the youngest child, because it had been 10 years since they had a child in between. So they're going to like, well, okay, give the kid a little more room. They just told me the only thing we want you to do is learn. And while I did get A's and B's, it got to the point where, you know what? I wanted to learn more than the grade. And I knew the grades were important. I'm not saying they're not important, but, so sometimes you can take a little bit of the pressure off and say, even with yourself, Lady Pruitte, to say, I learned something. And I will go back to when I was in the all-Black school in 7th grade. And this, I don't even know if this classmate is still alive. Eldine Billar was older than us and obviously had been held back. But Eldine dropped out in 7th grade, committed armed robbery, is in jail. And she became a different kind of role model for me, that what could have been done differently to stop that young girl, that teenager, from going that direction. The neighborhoods were different. We were more eclectic, and people from all economic backgrounds lived in the same neighborhood. That makes a difference. Poverty is the enemy. Ignorance is definitely the enemy. And I guess I really should go back and check, where is Eldine Villard? And I actually knew her. And she was a bully. Listen, I'm going to give Eldine. But you know, the ability to talk your way out of stuff, I never had a problem with Eldine.
Oh, good.
Language skills, so that those diplomatic skills that I learned then served me equally well as an ambassador. Being in the room with some presidents who truly still control their countries as authoritarian dictators, and to know what those men had done, then to meet, iconic figures like, it just is amazing that you have that opportunity in your life.
That's amazing. And my next question was actually going to ask about what role did mentorship play in your life? But I see that you were stressing patrons, and you were saying, and you were starting to tell us a little bit of the difference between patrons. I'm also curious to, how do you get to that point? How do you get patrons?
How do you get a patron? You don't necessarily get a patron. They are watching. Your mentors may, know them or may not know them, but it is an individual who's, I'm going to say, has the intellectual insight to look strategically and beyond the immediate moment, and who has a moral compass to say, wait a minute, I'm watching what's going on, and I don't like it because it's not good overall. It may not be for a personal reason because they know you, but they're looking at the bigger picture of what's good for everyone, the greater good. That's what a leader does. A leader goes beyond themselves. A mentor, when you have an outstanding mentor, they will tell you, you must outgrow me. They should not be your mentor for life. And I had, many, many different mentors who have now become my friends. And at the Defense Intelligence Agency, the first woman chief of staff, Anglo woman Barbara Duckworth, looked around and said, you know what? There's something wrong with this. Now, the Blacks in government leadership knew her well, had a conversation, and she decided to step in. She wasn't a mentor at that time. She was a patron because she didn't know me. And I was denied a promotion that was an automatic promotion. And she watched, I have to say, she watched the boys systematically miss the opportunity to correct before it got to her attention. So as I said, she gave them enough rope. And then she was going to make it dramatic. She came over because at that time her office was in the Pentagon. She said, I'm coming over. I'm going to kick one of the boys out of his office. And she said, we're going to sit here for 45 minutes and we're going to have a conversation. And she said, I'm telling you, I am going to move you because it is no longer safe for you to stay in this environment. And she gave me some choices where I was going to. But then she walked out and she lifted. She became a mentor after that. But I would say maybe about 5 years ago, before when I was leaving, she said, we are friends. She said, because you have surpassed me. So you should be on the lookout and know you're always being watched, even when you don't think you are, because someone behind a door has watched you and someone else has whispered to them and said, you need to watch this one. We need to lift this one.
That's good to hear. That's definitely good to hear and good to know. Great information. All right, my last question for you is, what advice would you give a young professional who was interested in working in government or international relations?
Okay, good question. This is what I would tell he or she is, your writing skills need to be strong. Your analytical skills, sharpen them. Your ability to look beyond the immediate, to look into the 5, 10, 20-year beyond situation and to anticipate. If you write well, and we all are improving on our writing. There are a handful of people in the world who write with ease. So, but it is a skill you can acquire. It is a skill you can continually perfect. So be well read. You need to be watching the news, reading the news more importantly than watching the news, and watch a variety of news things and read a variety. Don't just read what you believe in, because then you can't analyze if you don't know what other people are thinking and why they think what they do. That should serve you well in any field, but in particular in international relations. One of the things that I look back that I wish I had done more of was gain more language skills, different language skills. So if you have the opportunity now, get 2 or 3 languages beyond your English under your belt. I read French well, I understand it, I'm just timid. And maybe in this next phase, I will polish up some more things along the way. But I think that for me, if you take those skills, they will serve you not only in international studies and relations, but in business, because we are a global society and we have a responsibility. You need to be politically active. There are many ways to do that, and politically aware.
It's so funny because English is actually my second language. And now I wish I would have spent more time teaching my native tongue to my children, Spanish, because as they go back to my country, they're always like, "What? You didn't teach them in Spanish?" And I'm like, "Yes, I know." I feel really bad now because it can give you such a head up in life to be able to speak language, especially now because we're such a global society. To be able to speak more than one language is amazing. And I actually love languages. I love languages. I can speak a little bit of Italian, teeny weeny bit of French, because I love language. So in school, whenever I had the opportunity, I would always take the languages. So I just love them.
What a gift you have, and it's not too late to learn. And yes, we're all Star Trekkies or Star Wars people, and yes, we will have translators immediately. But you think differently in another language. And because I learned French from an early age, and my parents were like your parents because they didn't teach us the Creole, could understand some of it, but they did it for a reason, because at the time we were growing up, it was a stigma and they didn't want you to have the accent.
Spanish. And it's funny, and something you just said, and it's very true. I didn't even think about it until you just said it, which is when you have another language, you think differently, because you're right. There's a culture behind the language. Yes. So I know, like in Dominican Republic, which is where I'm from, and as I speak the Spanish language, there's a culture behind that language also that comes along with it. It's not just knowing how to be able to translate back and forth the language. So that was wonderful. Dr. Courville, Ambassador Courville, I am so thrilled. I had a wonderful time conversing with you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me. And I would like to thank you, audience, for watching us. And I pray and ask that you stay tuned and watch again Conversations with Lady Pruitte as I next month interview someone else who is a meaningful person in my life. God bless you, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Ambassador.
Pleasure. Okay.